Hello, and welcome to another episode from the Upgrade Your Education Business podcast. I'm your host, Samantha, and today we're talking about social media and more specifically, how to use it effectively in your business without feeling overwhelmed. I know that it can feel relentless. Coming up with new content ideas, battling the algorithm, and wondering if your posts are even being seen by the right people, if they're really making any kind of impact. Now, the good news is that social media marketing doesn't have to drain you, it doesn't have to take over your life. We are not full-time social media marketers. We are business owners, we are tutors, we are educators. We run a business and we have other things to do. So I'm all about making sure that your marketing is streamlined and effective. And today's all about making it work alongside your style, your time, so what's sustainable, and also your goals. So this episode is all about taking a simplified but results-driven approach where you're not having to be pushy, you attract the right people to you, but it isn't overwhelming. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Upgrade Your Education Business podcast. I'm your host, Samantha, and I'm so pleased you're here. As an education business owner myself and a former teacher, I understand the nuances that only apply to us. So in this podcast, I share fluff-free, tailored and actionable ideas that you can mould to suit your needs. If you'd like to take this conversation further, please do reach out. I would love to meet you. And finally, it would mean the world to me if you could leave a review. That way, you'll be helping me help more people. Thank you for tuning in. Enjoy. So a big reason why social media marketing often feels really overwhelming is because you're always thinking about what you need to post, and there's this impression that you have to be posting all the time. Now, being visible and being consistent is probably more important than posting every single day. Having something that's sustainable will help you actually be consistent. But often trends change, engagement fluctuates, and there's just so much pressure. You're always worried, am I even doing this right? Plus, there's this idea that visibility means being on every single platform, and that's just not the case. Here's the thing that is really worth remembering. Social media is just a tool. It's not your entire business strategy. And so it shouldn't be taking over your life. So how do we do that? How do we use this so it doesn't drain us of energy and it remains effective? Well, the first thing is to really understand your goals. Just earlier today, I was recording a special bonus training in the Tutors Mastermind with someone called Richard Marlowe, who I'm giving him a little shout out. Check him out on LinkedIn. He's a fantastic guy. His content is really good on LinkedIn. And he was talking to the masterminders about how he very quickly established himself on there. And the thing that he started with was he knew why he was on there. So having a goal will steer everything. You need to know what it is you want to achieve on any given platform or through your marketing in general in order to have a direction. So what is it that you may need? It could be that right now you are promoting something that's launching and so you want sales or signups. It could be that actually you want to raise your visibility, you want brand awareness, maybe you just want some more engagement and you want more of the right people in your network. All of these are really valid goals and you don't just have to choose one, but I would advise choosing one at a time. And that's one way to actually reduce the overwhelm, is choosing one goal at a time, focusing on that for say 3 months and then moving to another goal. And if you are in the mastermind, then look at the 1-year content training because that will really, really help. That's where we've put key dates in the diary and we work backwards from those so that you know when you need to sell, when you need to focus on engagement and connection and so on. So how does that translate to what you should actually be posting? Let's say you wanted more inquiries, then really you want to focus on showcasing your services, how you help. You want to show people the impact that you make. You want to show a little bit about your values so that you really stand out and so that people have a really clear reason why they might choose you and not someone else. Let's say you want more engagement, then you want to spark conversations. You want to post about topics that really connect and resonate with people. If you want to sell, then build that trust and make an offer. I often say that you need to earn the right to sell to people. And earning that right really comes in saying, look, this is why you can trust me. Let me show you what I can do. And then you can pitch, you can sell, and people won't find that insulting. You won't feel uncomfortable because actually it's a really natural part of that conversation. Now, as you can imagine, I have done a lot of work with tutors when it comes to social media marketing. If I had to choose, it would probably be the top challenge, probably closely followed by group classes. And just getting clear on goals, I have found reduces their stress, it reduces their overwhelm, and it immediately sparks ideas because they're like, okay, this is what I want to achieve. So naturally, this is what I would talk about. So start there, set your goal, understand your purpose. That 1 year content strategy training will take a lot of that thinking off your plate. Even if you're not in the mastermind, you can come up with a 1 year calendar and you can work backwards from key dates. And immediately it means that you always know what your purpose is when you just look at that calendar. Now, because I've spoken about that training a few times and a lot of masterminders listen to this, I'll pop the direct link to that training in the show notes so you don't have to look for it. Now, my second tip is to choose the right platform to focus on. The common advice is to go where your audience is. Now, that's true, but the reality is your audience might be in multiple places. So there is another layer to it. Ask yourself, where are they in a consumer mindset? Where are they likely to be interested in what you have to offer? So I'll just give you a really simple example. One of my parents is on LinkedIn and she's a social worker. Now, she's not on LinkedIn with her parent hat on. She's on there as a social worker. And so she wouldn't really be receptive. She wouldn't even think to connect with me, but she wouldn't be receptive to me selling tuition as such on there. Now, I'm not saying LinkedIn isn't any good if you want students. I talked about that in my LinkedIn webinar. I talk about that in my training. But I'm just giving you an example that when you are selecting which platform is really best to double down on, think of where your audience are and also where they're in a consumer mindset. Where are they likely to be looking for you? So a few examples. Let's say you teach GCSE students. Their parents might be on Instagram, but are they thinking about tutoring while they're scrolling through? Or are they on there because they connect with friends? And I don't know, I quite like following cooking tips and travel tips and stuff like that. So they may not be in the right mindset. Whereas on Facebook, maybe that's where they go to ask for recommendations. So maybe they're more likely to be receptive on there. Let's say you teach A-level students. Well, they're a little bit older and sometimes they are a bit more active in the decision-making process. So maybe a platform where they're on, like, let's say Instagram or perhaps even TikTok, maybe they would be more receptive and they would perhaps tell their parents that, look, I found this really great tutor. Could you get in touch with them because I really want to learn with them? For example, you have to treat this as an experiment and try things out. If you work with adults, if you work with schools or other businesses, then LinkedIn is a great platform to connect with them because they've got this professional to professional connection going on. So here's where the 80-20 rule can kick in. This is where 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. If you look it up, it's a really interesting story where that philosophy came from. And whenever I apply it to anything, even when I look at sales, it tends to come true. When I analyze where are my sales coming from, it's usually from 20% of my efforts. So this isn't me saying that there's no value in being on multiple platforms or that multiple platforms may not work for you. That's not what I'm saying. But we're talking about reducing the overwhelm. We're talking about streamlining. So choose your 20% really wisely. Choose the platform to really focus on and put your time and energy into where you're likely to be producing 80% of those results. Here it's quality over quantity. Okay, so you have decided on your goal, you have decided or shortlisted a platform. Now it's time for step 3, and that is to use a simple content strategy. Content does not have to be complicated to work. And if I were to categorize it, I would say there are 3 main categories. The first is where you're building your authority. And I like to see this as you kind of casting votes for your authority. So what are you doing right now that really showcases that you're immersed in the world, in your niche? What are you involved in that really showcases why you're an authority, why you know your stuff? So let's say that I was focusing on being a GCSE specialist. I'd be attending webinars run by exam boards and I'd be talking about that on social media, because that's a vote for my authority. I'm positioning myself. Sharing things like success stories and case studies, as well as testimonials and client stories, all of that then gets added to the mix as well. The second category are connection posts. This really helps people get to know you. You've probably heard of personal branding, and in April in the mastermind, I'm going to be doing some bonus training on that, because personal branding is really, really important, especially in this day and age where a lot of us work in an area where there are lots of people who offer the same thing as us. So when we strip that away, what are we left with? We're left with who we are, our values, our personalities. And when it comes to services, people tend to connect with people. They need a level of connection. So help people get to know you, share behind the scenes content and things that people can relate to, relatable experiences, questions that really encourages discussion and interaction and conversation. The third category are promotional posts. Don't be afraid to sell. Please don't get in the habit of always offering value, always starting a discussion, but never really selling, because then people will start associating you with this really interesting person and someone who, knows a lot about a subject, but they'll forget that they can also buy from you. You want to keep reminding people, so that the promotional posts are really important. Talk about your services, share those testimonials, let people know exactly what to do next to come and work with you. Now, although I've taken a slightly systematic approach here and I've split the types of content into categories, they can and often will be blended. You'll often overlap. So, for example, you might write a connection post, but you might sell in that post as well. A big point is that you don't need to reinvent the wheel every single time you're posting content. Repurpose content. If you think it's relevant and appropriate, reuse content. But you do need to keep your messaging nice and consistent. You need to repeat your messaging so that people really remember, so that it sticks. Remember, we are creating content that converts browsers into buyers. So we don't want to just stop at the browser section. We want people to engage with us in a way where they're interested in staying in our world, where they're interested in maybe taking that conversation further. Now, I've talked about repurposing as a really good time saver. And just to clarify, when you're repurposing content, it's about presenting the same thing from a fresh angle. So let's say, for example, you've got a post where you've shared 3 tips to do X, Y, and Z. You could then multiply that into 3 separate posts where each one focuses on one of those tips. Let's say you share a testimonial. Well, maybe you can represent that testimonial from a different angle. Maybe you're telling a story. Maybe it's coupled with a couple more testimonials. So it's not necessarily just repeating the same content, although some people do that. I personally don't recommend it, because I think if people are really engaged in your world and they're interacting, they'll notice that. So actually, I think it's better to repurpose rather than repeat. But we've talked about that as a time-saving technique. But another thing is to batch create and to schedule your content. That's a huge time saver. Now, some social media gurus will say, don't pre-schedule content. It will hurt the algorithm. It will hurt your reach. But the reality is, at least for me, if I didn't pre-schedule my content, I probably wouldn't post. I wouldn't post very often, at least, and I wouldn't be able to stay consistent. And you know what? Social media is something I talk about because I've built 2 businesses on social media through social media marketing. I continue to. So I know that it doesn't harm you quite as much as people may think it does. And batch creating is really useful because you know what it's like when you're writing content, you kind of get in the zone. And so if you spend that time producing content that gets you further ahead, it means that social media marketing isn't overwhelming because you're not under pressure every single day or every single week necessarily to produce that content. You can take a breather. So here are some ideas of what you can do. You could set an hour or 2 hours, depending on what you can manage, every week or every couple of weeks. And I always advise clients to have a goal, and I always start them with having a fortnightly goal. So when you sit down for an hour, try and try and create 2 weeks worth of content. Now, what that looks like depends on what you've decided on your frequency. So it might be that you're posting 3 times a week or once a week or twice a week, whatever it is. Make sure it's something you can really sustain and start getting in the habit of batch creating and giving yourself that 2 week breather, so that if there's a week where you're just not in the zone, you don't have the headspace, it's fine. You know that content is going out. And to help, use tools like Meta Business Suite. That works well with Instagram and Facebook. Planoly, Later. I use Zoho Social. Use a tool that's going to help you schedule content in advance. Even if it costs money, it's really worth it, because if you're going to get results, if you're going to get sales through social media, then all of this, it will pay for, you'll get a return on that investment. And if it helps you be consistent, then in my opinion, it's really worth the investment. But if it's not something you can afford, find a system that does work for you. Maybe what you do is you sit there and you plan your content and you just save it on your calendar on particular days, so that all you have to do is copy and paste, and there you go. You've posted it live rather than pre-scheduling it. And one really big thing that works on social media is engagement and being present. So this episode's actually really important, because if you reduce the overwhelm, if you manage to streamline, then it releases some time. And it's really worth being present, because it's really easy to just, post content and then that's it and rely on that. But when we're thinking about this being a way to create relationships that turn into business, we have to be present for those relationships. If you were meeting some friends, you wouldn't send a video recording of yourself saying, "Hi, how you doing? This is what I've been up to." You'd actually show up. You'd be there. You'd be present in the conversation. That's how relationships are formed. That's how they get stronger. So it doesn't need to take over your day. Maybe you set aside 5 to 10 minutes a day to just engage on a particular platform that you're focusing on. And it's even better if you can do that around the time that you post. Do I manage to do that every day? No, I don't. And so if you don't manage to do that, it's not going to hurt the reach that you get, the engagement or the sales that you get. But in an ideal world, it definitely boosts it. So I would recommend doing that if you can. Now, my 5th step is to track what works and adjust accordingly. This is one big experiment. There is a reason why I haven't just given you a formula today, why I haven't said, do X, Y, and Z, post X number of times on this platform and then on that platform, and you will just get business. The reality is this is an experiment. What might work for me may not work for you, and vice versa. And we may not even be able to identify why. Social media marketing is a constant experiment. It's constant trial and error. And so when you are focusing on one goal, on one platform, on one strategy, you actually have the headspace to track the right data, if you like, or the right information. So pay attention to things like which style of posts tend to get more engagement, if that's what your focus is on, or more inquiries. What content style seems to resonate more with your audience, or what kind of topics resonates more? And what type of posts actually lead to people reaching out and requesting your services? Now, if you're a new business, then you're going to be in the position where you're experimenting, you're exploring, and you're gathering that data. Obviously, if you work with someone like me, then I can give you some indications of trends and things that work. You can fast track the trial and error process a little bit. But the whole thing is an experiment. When I work with clients on this, even though my one-to-one package has a time limit, I often go over that time limit, because I'll say to them, look, we've gained momentum. Now I want you to wait a month before you actually book your last session in with me, even though it means going over the time, because we need to see how it works. For me to give them anything valuable, we need to keep that going consistently and see what's happening. So make sure you're tracking the right data. If you are after sales and inquiries, then don't get so hung up on how many likes you're getting on a post. Often people who want to work with you or do work with you often won't engage so much in your content. I don't know how that works, but it's how it works. So focus on the right data. How many inquiries are you getting? How many sales are you getting? If you're thinking about visibility, then yes, you might want to look at how many new connection requests you're getting, how much engagement you're getting, and so on. If you're thinking about connection, then you might want to track how many comments you're getting. How many conversations are you successfully starting? Now, when you've got that data, when you're keeping a track of that, Double down on what works and let go of what doesn't. Ignore advice that may work for other people. Even if I'm giving you that advice, ignore it. If you have already figured out what's working for your audience and for you, that's what you double down on. You don't need to chase every single trend if it's not serving your business. So, to wrap up, social media needs to work for you, not the other way around. We don't want it to be draining. And we can do that by keeping things simple. You don't need something complicated for it to be effective. Focus on those clear goals. Make sure you have a purpose so that when you're writing content, you know what you want to achieve. Focus on the right platform. It doesn't mean abandoning the rest. Maybe you just keep it going, one post a week, let's say, just to keep a bit of momentum going if you choose to. But actually pay attention and be present on the platform where you've got customers, potential customers, and they're in a consumer mindset. Create a manageable content strategy. Actually planning in advance will take a lot of the thinking off your plate. I have things like content prompts, just to take some of that thinking away. We've got things like ChatGPT. Use the tools that are in front of you. Now, just a little word on something like ChatGPT. I think it can be so helpful, but please make sure that you look through it properly. So, for example, I know that for me, ChatGPT will produce Americanized English. I need to change that if I were to use it. But also make sure that you are staying true to your voice, that you're following things like copywriting rules. I have found when I've experimented with ChatGPT, it produces really chunky paragraphs. I don't like that. I like to space mine out. So I personally don't use AI to help me with social media content, but there's nothing wrong with using it if you need it. But just make sure that you are staying true to your voice and your style and what you want to talk about. And use things like scheduling tools to save time, repurpose, batch create. Do what you need to do to make it sustainable. It doesn't matter if it harms your engagement a little bit. It's not going to make your strategy just, fall to pieces. So if it helps you stay consistent and that's what's going to pay off, then use it. So I'd really encourage you to think about one action you're going to take right now, today, in the next 24 hours to actually make social media marketing less overwhelming. Choose just one tip that I've talked about. Don't try and do all of them at the same time. Otherwise, that will end up being overwhelming. Just choose one thing, and then that will release some time and that will give you headspace to choose another thing. And remember, if you want training on writing content that converts, if you want a head start with content prompts, if you want that 1-year plan where I'm just showing you how to do it and giving you examples, head over to the Tutors Mastermind and you'll find all the training in there. If you're not already in there, you get instant access to absolutely everything. So come and join us in there, and I really look forward to welcoming you or seeing you in there. That's all from me today, and you'll hear from me on Wednesday. Would you like to take this discussion further? Perhaps you have some questions or you'd like more ideas on tailoring your business. If so, book a free discovery call through the link in the show notes.